All right, let's see if we get this. Do I have a mic on? Okay, good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have all of you here today. We're going to start off with the Department of Juvenile Justice. Commissioner Oliver, if you could, and to your team, join us. We're glad to have you this morning. We're going to begin our public safety subcommittee hearings today. We've got three on the agenda today. We're going to take off with DJJ, then we'll have DPS with Colonel McDonough, and then we'll have the GBI finishing up for where we left off last week. And so with that, what we'll do is we're going to be looking on page 16 of 22 on your amended budget. We'll be dealing with we'll go through those particular changes there. And so what we'll do is let's go through the amended, and then what I'd like you to do is go through the amended. We'll take some notes. We'll have some feedback on that amended budget, but then we'll go right into the fiscal year 2021 budget as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
All right.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. I'm going to go through the 2020 amended budget. We had a total reduction of $14.6 million. And let's go through your line items on your tracking sheet. So statewide adjustments total $555,085, and that was across the board in all of our programs in line item 31.1, 1 and 31.21, 31.31, and 31.41. Community service programs was $136,188. DJJ administration was $41,206. Our secure commitment, which is our YDC, is $161,863, and our secure detention, our RYDC, is $215,828. Next, we reduced funds by freezing security and non-security positions that were vacant since November 1, 2018 for a total of $14.4 million in our community, and that was a total of 342 positions. 232 were security and 110 were non-security. On our community service side, which is line item 31.1.2, was $2.1 million, and that was 52 positions in that program. Administration, $215,621, which is 4 positions that were non-security. Our secure commitment, which is our YDCs, was $7.8 million, which is 187 positions. 157 were security, 30 were non-security. Secure detention, our YDCs, was $4.2 million. For 99 positions, 75 were security and 24 non-security.
One right back through this again.
All right. And it was a total of freezing our vacant positions since November 1, 2018. They were vacant since November 1, 2018. It was a total of 342 positions. Out of that, 232 were security positions. 110 were non-security. In our community service program, was 52 positions, which is a reduction of which cost savings of $2.1 million. In administration, which 4 positions, which was non-security, $215,621. Our secure commitment, our YDCs, were 187 positions. 157 were security, and 30 were non-security. That was a cost savings of $7.8 million. Secure detention, which is our RYDCs, 99 positions, 75 were security, 24 non-security, for a cost savings of $4.2 million.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let me ask you a question about that. Out of that, can you tell me what the ratio is that you have now in terms of your secured staff versus the youth that are detained?
The exact ratio?
Yes, the ratio between those secured personnel that you have in your RYDCs and your YDCs.
We're meeting our PREA standards, so I don't know the exact. I can get that information to you, our exact numbers of officers per per youth.
Okay, because, yeah, let's find out what that ratio is, if you could. And if we could find out from someone before you leave today.
Yes, sir.
That'd be helpful. Now, when you cut these positions, or not you, but when the governor's recommendation has a cut plan for those security positions, the numbers as I understood it, was 232 total security positions. Is that right?
232 total security, correct.
Okay. And then you were telling me that out of that 232, let's see, 75 on the RYDCs, and then there was 157, yeah, in the YDCs.
Correct.
Okay, and then you said there was a 52 cut in the security. Is it community supervision?
Community, yes.
Okay. And those are those secure those security
They're
positions?
non-security. Most
Non-security?
of them were admin positions.
Okay.
And those are this freezing the vacant positions in the amended.
All of these are unfilled.
Correct. No one was in them.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear. We're not cutting people.
No, sir.
These are unfilled vacant positions that you haven't been able to fill for a year or longer.
Yes, sir.
And you're cutting those positions.
Yes, sir.
Out of the budget. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
All right.
I'm sorry, Vice Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, sir. First of all, I appreciate the hard work that you guys have put into this budget. Just one quick question, and you may have already answered it, but I noticed under each subsection you have reduced funds by reducing travel and eliminating supplementary training conferences. The eliminating the supplementary training conferences, is this training for people that would have been brought on now that we're not filling that position, or is this people that are already there? And if so, I understand there's all kinds of training conferences or whatever. Does this put us in any type of position of where we're maybe not as well trained as what we should be?
No, absolutely not. It's not, and this is the next line item for those that are tracking, but this is not going to impact that. It's not going to, it's just for existing staff. And so what we found was we're going to like 4 and 5 day conferences throughout the state. So we're going to try to condense them into maybe a 1.5 day conference, do some lunch and learns, leverage technology of our learning management system to help facilitate some of that training. So we're still going to continue to have training for our staff. We're just kind of limiting the days for per diem and travel and expenses for a
So you're just basically streamlining it, bringing it in.
streamline it. Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, sir.
That's a good question, Vice Chair. On the training, as you know, Commissioner, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, the PREA statute, has certain federal regulations that they have to follow. I think it's 28 CFR section 115.313 talks about supervision and monitoring. The other one speaks to employee training and contractor training. So are you going to, and that's section 115.331, is the training elimination that you're engaging, is that going to cut out the training that's required by federal law?
Absolutely not. Okay. Absolutely not. This training is just for like I said, our developmental training, like our executive, like our conferences for, let's say Secure Commitment wants to go to a conference to learn, to develop them a little bit further in their career. We're going to streamline that a little bit. It has nothing to do with any kind of federal statute, federal mandated training that we put on.
Good. Just wanted to check. All right. Thank you.
And that brings us into the next one, was eliminate our supplemental training conferences, and I'll just quickly go through that since we talked about it. Community service was 149,400. Administration was 28,800. Our secure commitment 172,200, and our secure detention 249,600. Next, we reduced funds by eliminating landline telephones for employees who have cellular phones, and that was a cost savings of $88,469. And our community service program, it was $22,117. Administration, $4,424. Secure commitment, $25,656. And our secure detention, $36,272.
Mr. Commissioner, could you tell me just what's the base salary for security personnel in DJJ?
Starting salary is around 27,000.
And what is it with benefits? Do you know?
You know what the exact number? We'll check on that to get the exact number.
I had a individual, actually a member of the House, talk to me last week about actually meeting one of the security officers, and she was actually working two jobs. She had a job doing her DJJ job, and then was driving Uber at night.
Yes.
And so that prompted my question to find out what the base salary is for your employees. Do you consider that base salary a challenge in terms of trying to find people to hire for the vacant positions?
It is. It's a challenge, and that's one of the things I speak on in the 2021 budget. But it is a challenge. But we do a good job recruiting. We just got to do a better job of retaining. But I think that's part of the piece, especially when we look at some of our facilities, like Rockdale, for example. We have our Rockdale RYDC right there, and then literally in the same parking lot is Rockdale County Sheriff's Office, which you can go over there and make at least $10,000 more. Yeah, roughly.
Okay, and that would be just working for the sheriff's department and entry level position there.
Entry level position in their detention center, correct?
Okay.
With benefits, it's 45,000.
I'm sorry.
With benefits, it's 45,000.
Commissioner, I don't know whether you have this or not. It's just when you're talking about right there is Rockdale County Sheriff and how I think everybody's got that position right there where people are jumping like crazy. Do you have any type of a handle on what the average length of time people work with you guys are? I mean, are you seeing a turnover every 3-4 years, 5 years, or?
It kind of averages out, or it depends. Sometimes they stay with us for a year, sometimes longer. Sometimes they get in there and they realize the job is not for them, and then they leave a lot sooner. So it's kind of all over. But I would say the average length of stay last time I looked at it was somewhere around a year.
In your opinion, it's just an opinion. If we were able to raise the salaries and maybe do a few other things like that, would you find yourselves sort of like where Department of Corrections were, maybe retaining people a little bit longer?
I think so. I think it'll play a factor in it. Again, I always say that the applicants know what the salary is walking in the doors. It's up to me and the staff here at DJJ to provide that culture for them to where they want to stay.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Yes. All right.
Is that Roger Bruce? You have your
Yes, sir.
Representative Bruce.
When you talk about the culture, the salary, is not an incentive to work. I've got 30 years of HR, and once they learn how to spend whatever the salary is, then it's no longer an incentive.
Yes.
So what are some of the other things that you guys are doing? And do those things cost money so that, if we need to be taking that into consideration as we go through this process, what are some of the other things that you do to incent people?
Our employees are our most valued asset, and so one of the things we're trying to do now is just appreciate them for the hard job that they're doing and recognize them. We go around the state and we talk to the employees, we listen to them, hear their thoughts, because they have boots on the ground. And so a lot of times what I found, especially coming in this position, being brand new, is that they have a lot of good ideas and a lot of them just want to be heard and implement some things to make their job a little bit better. So I think if we can do that, and if it's feasible, and then that doesn't cost anything, and it's just small. Sometimes it's small changes. A lot of times they just want to see your face of the executive team, or just say thank you for what you do, and that goes a long way, and it's been proven to be effective over the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any kind of an incentive program, if they come up with a good idea, that they can be compensated for coming up with a good idea, or compensated, not necessarily money, but maybe that too, but some way to keep people, because if they only stay in a year, you're losing money in that process, and you're losing a lot of money in that process. So is it a way to do some things creatively to increase the the tenure.
Yes, we're looking at everything as far to try to do that, as far as helping retention. But it's not a DJJ problem. I think it's a problem throughout public safety as a whole, not only in Georgia but across the nation. The economy is good. That's another reason why people are leaving. I remember being in during the recession and being in policing. A lot of the police officers who came back to law enforcement or entered law enforcement, it was because it was a secure job. And now that the economy's picked back up, I think people are going back to they can make more money in the private sector than working in our facilities.
All right, Chairman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, looking at the educational portion here, how many positions are not being filled for the education area there?
In our education department, I think we're pretty stable. It's been stable on education. I'm not sure how many positions we have vacant. We have 2 in our YDCs and 3 in our RYDCs.
Looking at the to reduce the funds to reflect a delayed portion of the Korean technical, I thought we had moved forward on using the technical colleges there.
Yeah, so we delayed. So we didn't open that until that program in the RYDC and the YDCs until October, and so we just used it. It was funded in July, and so we just took those funds from that delayed opening.
So you used okay. So that did not affect the
No, sir.
total program at all.
No, sir.
What is the average, Mr. Chairman? May I ask another? What is the average salary of a teaching personnel in our facility?
Around 60,000.
Around 60,000.
Yes, sir.
And how many do we have?
I think it's 140. Hang on a second. Is it right here?
Yeah.
140.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes.
I have 19. Who's 19?
That's me.
Okay.
Thank
Chairman
you.
Powell.
You said you got about 140 teachers in the system,
Yes, sir.
and you said that that base pay is 60,000 average pay
Average, yes, sir.
on the base officers and your security officers. 28,000, do I understand? And,
Yeah,
and how many of those do you have? Department
Getting
wide.
over into our 2021, but I can let you know in just a second. Got that on here. Here it is. And so in our YDC program, we have filled 873, and in our RYDC program, we have a total of 13. But out of that, let me try to break down your security. Security is that's our total positions. Hang on 1 second. You got it? That's vacant. I can get the total number of officers that we have in our security. I have the our field in our programs, but not broken down by our security staff.
Guesstimation.
Hang on, let's see if we got it. He's got it up here. In our YDC, this total security position is 699, and our RYDC is 1168.
These numbers, roughly 2,000 officers, secured
Yes.
officers. When you say 28,000 base, what would be an average pay for these? Because I'm sure a lot of them are above the base, but probably not a whole lot more.
Not a whole lot more. Not a whole lot more. Our average salary, I would say, is probably 30s for a JCO, JCO 1, JCO 2. It's in the low 30s.
Other than your executive staff in the department, like just your normal admin staff, what would be just a ballpark figure on what those salaries would be?
I can tell you, in the 2021 recommendations, when we did the about the $1,000 salary range for employees who make under 40,000, 80% of our employees, a little over 80% of our employees will benefit from that. So it's about 2,260 employees that will benefit from that recommendation.
So basically, you have even the admin is relatively low or below 40,000.
Yes.
I was curious at one of the comments that you had made about giving the low salaries that y'all try to pep them up and all of that. So how does these attaboys seem to be working? Does that seem to keep them on the retention rate?
I think over the last, we have positive feedback over the last 6 months. Of course, you can't just give them out every day because they'll lose their value. But for the hardworking employees out there that do a good job, we tend to go ahead and recognize those employees that they're doing a good job. But of course, that's a small piece of it. But I mean, it helps. Any little bit helps.
I mean, I reckon my question when I said that about how does the attaboys work, all that makes employees feel good, but at the end of the day, it costs just as much for these people to pay their bills, to put food on their table, as it does educators and other personnel. And it's just a point, not criticism towards the department, because I understand water runs downhill. But I have some concerns that, not unlike it I had for years about Department of Corrections. We wonder why inmates in the Department of Corrections, why they get whatever they get in contraband and all of that. And, when you're paying the low scale, it seems to be awful appealing to these officers to maybe step across that line, because when they're feeding their families and having to pay their bills being at such a low pay, they're certainly going to look at something else. You mentioned going to a sheriff's department or a jailer or something like that. It's such a competitive market out there that these folks.
It is.
Enough said, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Green.
Thank you. One other question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, as I've traveled throughout the number of institutions that we have, many individuals that are now serving as guards are 18 years of age. What is your opinion about people that are 18 or 19 serving as officers who are guarding individuals that are not much older than them, or some of them are close to being the same age?
I think we train officers very well coming in the door. I did look at that, and I think at the last time I looked at it was sometime back in November. I think we only had like 37 employees, security staff that were actually 18. The majority of our staff were over 21. And I can get those exact numbers for you before we leave, but we don't have that many JCOs at that time that were 18 years of age or up between 18 and 21. So
we have about 37, and they come right into the position there. How long is their training?
The training is they go through 6 week
6 weeks
training,
yes.
And then they have about a month or so of FTO training when they get back to the facility.
I just wonder about the maturity factor there, and I know it takes we need that entry of those individuals there to get them into the system for workers and everything. But I still am very concerned about the maturity factor in that.
Yes.
I'd be interested in having a conversation with you.
And one of the reasons why I actually I looked at that number, because we were considering raising our age for a hire and see what impact it will have on that. But as when I looked at it, we only have a very small number of JCOs that are between 18 and 21, but it's still not out of the possibilities.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
How prevalent is the use of overtime to help you satisfy your workforce demands?
In some of our facilities, we're utilizing overtime to compensate for the shortages, and so we're utilizing it some and most of the time in some of our facilities.
Okay. Is it fair to say that that's because you don't have enough people?
Yes.
Okay. My understanding is that the turnover rate for entry-level officers was 130% for the time period that ended June 30th of last year. This is according to an Atlanta Journal-Constitution article. One, I could see your reaction. Do you believe that that's accurate? And if not, why? And then two, what is your understanding of what the numbers are? And then three, what are you doing to address the turnover?
All right. So total on our turnover rate for last year, we were at total for the whole DJJ security and non-security was at 22%. For security staff, we lost 448 during that period. And I think, again, I think it goes back to, this the culture change as well as supporting it now. Listen, they're dealing with a more difficult population than they ever have before, especially with criminal justice reform. I was looking at the numbers before. A majority of our kids coming in, staying long term with us are there. They're there for violent offenses, and so that plays another factor into why some of them are leaving. It's just sometimes it's not working in a jail. I know sometimes it's not for them. But we're trying our best to address that. That doesn't cost that much money as far as again recognizing the employees, trying to come up with more incentives for them. We're looking at other things behind the scenes as far as making some changes administratively to help support them a little bit better. And so we're trying to take a holistic approach on it.
Cultural change is very difficult to do. It usually takes years.
Yes.
With sustained effort.
Yes.
And the numbers that you said of over 400 just last year seem pretty high in terms of the turnover. So that's clearly an area that needs improvement because it's very expensive to continue to bring new people on, have them trained, and then move forward. So I think it would be helpful to have a better understanding of the exact drivers of what is really leading to the turnover and the long-term plan in terms of how to address it.
And so one of the things that we just implemented in the last 6 months is our exit interviews. We're starting to conduct exit interviews, so we're starting to collect that data, and then also we're implementing employee surveys to see why people are actually staying, so we can replicate that. And so some of that data is just now coming in, and so we're able to hone in on exactly why people are leaving and why people are staying. And so we plan on using that information to help us in our retention efforts.
Okay, and you mentioned that in many ways, what's being asked of the correction officers is more challenging. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by that?
I'm not saying what's being asked of them is challenging. I just think they're dealing with a more difficult population, and they're in these facilities and the communities and especially in the facilities with the youth more than 12 plus hours. And so when you're in there for that length of period of time, and then having to work overtime as well, sometimes that can wear on you. And then again, when the economy's picking up, they know they can go somewhere else and make more money. They don't have to deal with those conditions. That's another challenge for us as far as retention as well.
Okay, and last question, Mr. Chairman, if I may. On that, what is, if there is an average of those that are in that situation with overtime, can you give us a sense on what people are working on a weekly basis and how much overtime on a daily basis they're seeing? Is it 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours? Give us some context there.
And I can get you the exact numbers on average, but it all depends. It all depends from facility to facility, and what the needs are of that facility, whether we have to have holdovers due to staffing shortages, or we have programming needs, things of that nature. So it all depends on from facility to facility.
What's the most that anybody's being asked to work, including overtime, on a weekly basis?
We try not to, as far as overtime, It's typically on a volunteer basis unless we have to mandatory make them. So I can give you the exact breakdown, but we don't hold anyone over more than 16 hours a day.
Okay. All right, Representative Hogan, thank you for those questions. So he'd asked and quoted a turnover rate of 130%. Now, did we get a verification that that is the turnover rate as of June of last year?
The turnover rate that I have for the month of for the calendar year or fiscal year, the total turnover rate was at about 45% for DJJ, and I can break that down for security versus non-security.
Okay. Because if your total staff is looking at, over 2,000 in terms of your YDCs and RYDCs, and you're having a 440% turnover, you're losing, losing 25 to 28% of your folks.
We're
annually.
losing more than we're actually retaining, than we're bringing in.
Right. So following up on that, how many positions are you retaining that will be paid positions but are vacant presently? So let's go through it for secured and non-secured. So when we look at it after we do the freeze here, the governor's recommendation of a freeze on these positions, I want to know how many we have left over that are not frozen. They're vacant, they're funded, but they're not frozen. I want to do it on a secured and non-secured basis.
All right, so remaining we have in our YDC 216. In our RYDC, we have 394.
And are those
And no security,
are those both secured numbers?
security vacancies, yes, sir.
And then what about non-secured?
Non-security in our YDCs, which we have 91. In our RYDCs, we have 94.
Are the non-secured and secured, are they similar in their pay scale, or is there a difference?
It's a difference. Sometimes they're similar. Like I said, about 80% of our staff are under 40,000. Some of our counselors are making somewhere around 29,000, a juvenile counselor. So,
All right. Representative Micah Gravely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I appreciate your presentation today as well. I know we've got a lot of questions. I want to know, what is the investment cost from the state's perspective? Earlier, we've got an average, or we've got some 18-year-olds, maybe not a lot, but maybe individuals coming in their early 20s as law enforcement personnel. The FTO training, the 6 weeks, how much has the state invested in the training of these individuals? If indeed we've got 45%, if half the individuals are leaving, how much are we losing as a state because we've already invested in their training to be law enforcement personnel within the department? And then because of outside factors like the economy, other positions, maybe a county or city PD or county sheriff's office has recruited them out and they can get a little bit more money. How much have we invested and how much are we losing? Because obviously these individuals have to be trained. We've invested an amount into them, and then they're gone within a year, 2 years. We have to do that process all over again. We've got to fill those positions and pay to have those individuals trained, correct? And I guess my question is, how much does it cost us to get them up to where they can actively go to work on a daily basis as a trained law enforcement personnel in the Department of Juvenile Justice?
do you have that number? We'll get back that number to you, but one of the things that we've also implemented is under, I can't remember what statute it is, slipping my mind right now, but once we send our certified officers, once we send our JCOs to that training, we require them to stay with us for a minimum period of about 18 months, 24 months, and if not, if they leave to go to another agency, then that agency or that JCO would have to reimburse the state for that training.
Okay.
Yes.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I would like to, and maybe you don't have it right now, but I'd like to get, how many are actually staying past that 18 months?
Okay.
And how many are, hey, listen, it's at the 15th month, I got to get out of here, I'm making more money, are having to reimburse the cost of that training?
We just implemented that.
I gotcha.
And so on the top of my head right now, I don't think we have anybody who's left since we implemented that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner, also, is there what was your bond request for the fiscal year 2020? Yes, 2020. Last fiscal year, we have a,
Last year.
Oh,
Little
last-
8 million.
I'm sorry?
8 million last year.
8 million. There's a redirect, a notice of a redirect that's been requested by your department for about 11.7 million redirect from Gwinnett County's detention facilities elsewhere.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain what the redirect request is and why you're making it?
The redirect request is to redo our education center down in Augusta. And the education center down there, as our ETC is in very, very bad shape with mold, water intrusion, and so our kids are going in there and our staff going in there are in those conditions, and then also for a redesign on our Macon, I think it was a YDC, Macon YDC, for a redesign on that facility, such as a large footprint, to kind of come up with a design to construct that to smaller, to shrink that footprint down in Macon.
But wasn't the commission's request for the fiscal year 2020 budget a request to equip and construct and design a new juvenile detention facility in Gwinnett County?
That was, looking at it, I think it was not a juvenile detention center. I want to say it was like a transportation hub or something in Gwinnett. From my understanding and doing some research on it when I came in before we did the redirect, that we couldn't find any land in Gwinnett to meet that $11.11 million to find the land and then construct. And then on the time constraints that we're under to have that money spent, we wouldn't be able to do it in that time of the bond.
Yeah, I think according to this letter that I've got here, it was there was actually a fiscal year 2018 bond request for design, construction, and equipping a juvenile transition center in Gwinnett County. And that was a bond request of $11.7 million?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What, and the explanation is that you were not able to find the land to place this facility on?
Correct. And I spoke with the leadership up there, Chairman and Senator Utterman, in reference to that here about a month or so ago, and we couldn't find the land and do the construction for $11 million in Gwinnett.
Okay. Do you know what the process by which you go through to make a bond redirect outside of the appropriations process?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's roll on to the full budget.
All right.
The big budget for the 2021.
All right.
Page 16 of your track sheet.
2021 recommendation of total reduction of 19 million. We had statewide adjustments of $611,496. And that was and also we reduced funds on a TRS program for 21.14% to 19.6%, and that was a cost savings of $226,821. And just to go down, our community service line item, our community service program was cost savings of $4,045. Our secure commitment, $95,597. Secure detention, $127,179. Again, another statewide adjustment for our cybersecurity. Insurance premiums is $10,000, cost savings of $10,353. and we reduced our funds for our GTA administrative fees across all of our programs, which is cost savings of $374,322. And just to kind of break that down, our cybersecurity was in administration was $10,353. Community service $91,838 for GTA administrative fees. Administration $27,787. Secure commitment $109,154, and our secure detention $145,543. Spoke on this here briefly. The next one was increased funds to provide a $1,000 pay raise for full-time employees with current salaries of $40,000 or less. That's a budget impact of $3.6 million. And it's, like I said earlier, it's going to affect 2,260 employees that will receive this pay increase. And across the programs in our community service, it's 918,924. That's about 570 employees that'll benefit from that in that program. Administration, 58,037. 36 employees will benefit from that. Our secure commitment, which is our YDCs, $991,471, and about 615 employees will benefit from that. And our secure detention, which is our RYDCs, 1.6 million, and 1,039 employees will benefit from that.
Mr. Commissioner, when you're saying $40,000 or less, that's is it the salary and
Salaries.
benefits? That when you say 40,000, you're talking about salary plus benefits, right?
Correct.
Okay, so those folks that are receiving, because I'm looking at these numbers and the increase obviously in $58,000 in administration, and then on the and $991,000 on your secured commitments YDCs.
Yes.
And so is this going to hit your entry level positions then?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm also seeing on the budget items for each one of these, there's an increased funds to adjust the state salary schedule for certified employees by $2,000.
That's the teachers.
Okay.
And that was.
So that means that those individuals that are making about $60,000 are going to see a $2,000 increase.
Yes.
Are you having any problems with retaining teachers in your system?
No, sir.
And do you have vacancies in the teaching positions?
I think total, what we said earlier, I think it was 3. It's 6 total. I think it was 3 and 3. 3 in our YDCs and 3 in our YDCs. That's one.
Okay, so how many teachers do you have?
140.
140 total?
So total, yes.
And that's total in both facilities,
Correct.
YDCs? Okay.
Correct.
Because so that means that out of your vacancies, you're not seeing the kind of turnover that you're seeing in your secure personnel.
True.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right. Next, we reducing funds by eliminating security and non-security positions that were vacant since July 1, 2018, and that was a cost savings of $8.8 million, and that was a total of 206 positions. 143 were security positions, and 63 were non-security positions. In our community service, we eliminated 40 positions that were vacant since July 1, 2018. That was cost savings of $1.7 million. Our administration was 1 non-security position, which was $84,642. Our secure commitment, it's 115 positions, 101 security, 14 non-security, and that was $4.8 million. And our secure detention, 50 positions, 42 security, 8 non-security, which was $2.1 million.
Okay, let me go back. Let's go back through
That's
this.
fine.
I was writing that.
Sorry.
I wasn't keeping pace with you. All right, so you had eliminated 206 total.
Correct.
Okay, and then out of that was 143 was secured,
And 63 were non-security.
and that's your total across the board for the entire
Correct.
the entire full budget.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, and then you were breaking that down into the different
Yes, sir.
program areas. Okay, so let's go back to those program areas.
All right, and our community service program is 40 positions.
Okay,
Administration, 1 non-security position.
with the communities, those 40, those secured or non-secured.
Non-security, there was a total of 5. 5 were law enforcement staff, which was our high-intensity probation officers, and 3 probation, but then everything else is administrative.
So 8 were sworn officers then?
5.
5.
Two police officers,
Okay,
and 3 probation.
gotcha. So then 35 are non-secured.
Correct.
Okay, admin was 1 non-secure, and then
Yes.
what was the other one?
Secure commitment, which was our YDCs, 115, 101 security, 14 non-security.
Okay,
And our security tension, which is our RYDCs, 50 positions total, 40 or 42 security, 8 non-security.
okay, thank you.
Next item, we increase funds to utilize operations for our CSEC victims facility in Paulding County by that was $100,682, and that was for trafficking youth that we in our Paulding facility due to House Bill 751. Next, we reduce funds by eliminating landlines. This is a carryover from the amended with employees who have cellular phones. That was $353,873 of total savings. And our community service programs, $88,468. Cost savings, administration, $17,694. Secure commitment, which is our YDCs, $102,623. Secure detention, RYDCs, $145,088.
On the positions that were, the frozen positions, I want to make sure that I got this straight. When we talked about it under the amended budget, but when we talk about vacant and funded positions, the numbers you gave me earlier are the same numbers you're applying going
Correct.
forward. Is that right? So that'll be your current numbers.
Plus, I think there was an
The
additional.
216 secure, and then in the YDCs, the 91 non-secure. And then the RYDCs, 394 secured and 94 non-secured. Those positions are still planned to be funded, but unfilled in the 2021 budget. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then, how many beds do we have occupied, or just on average in terms of a year? About how many beds remain
All right.
occupied?
Average on our YDC, our utilization rate on our YDC side is about 50%, and our RYDC is about runs about 70%.
And what does it mean?
And so our total bed space as it stands right now, without going into the proposed Sumter closure, on our YDC side, we have a total of 746 beds. And in our RYDC side, we have a total of 1,204 beds.
And then when post-Sumter closing, you'll lose, what, about 158 beds?
Yes, 150 beds. So with Sumter closing, it's a 150 bed facility, so we'll go down to 596.
Okay.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Next item was a carryover from the amended budget where we're reducing our travel, and eliminating Supplementary training conferences, that was 600,000 cost savings. 150 was on the community service side. 30,000 was administration. YDC, our secure commitment, was 174,000. Security detention, 246. And again, we're leveraging technology to best meet the needs of our staff as far as their supplemental training.
We talked about this before, Commissioner, about gang renunciation and trying to prevent gang affiliations within the RYDCs and the YDCs, and then also to work on those that come in with gang affiliations to try to renunciate those gang affiliations. To what extent will you be doing that going forward, and how are you going to implement that?
And that's one of my main goals going into this year is to really focus on that Gang Prevention and Intervention Act. We'll work heavily with our reentry programming to provide positive mentorship interventions and hopefully get these kids to denounce the gang, but then also connect them with some job opportunities or educational opportunities once they get out. I think that's going to be a key factor in helping them stay out of the gang life.
Okay. You can provide it to me afterwards, but what is your per RYDC for each unit? What is your total number of sworn security or security personnel for each one of your facilities relative to the bed numbers?
I can get that for you.
Yeah. I don't want to go through each one of them.
Okay.
Now we'll be here a lot longer. But if you could, secure positions for each facility and the number of beds for each facility. Okay. Then also, I'd like to find out more. There's been some interesting studies that have been done on gang and youth violence interventions. There's been some research and literature that has evidence-based practices for trying to deal with gang affiliations in youth detention facilities. The hope here is to try to implement some evidence-based results that you all can use to try to avoid individuals that are currently affiliated with gangs continuing the affiliation once they've left your facilities, and then continuing that endeavor into adulthood. So I have some concerns that if we're trying to address gang affiliations, the sooner you can do it, the more effective it will be long term. I also have some concerns about releasing individuals that have gang affiliations going in and reestablishing those bonds once they leave the facilities. That seems to be a high likelihood of occurrence. So the transitioning out is extremely important in trying to prevent that reaffiliation with those gangs. So I think the committee will want to know more about those plans and what funding you're going to need to try to help implement that, because that's not a small. I can't imagine that being a small and inexpensive endeavor, but I think it's important if your initiative is to eradicate gangs and to try to undermine the gang network and that criminal network within communities, then you have to start with the youth, and you have to, and while you have them under your care, you have to work with them at that particular time to renounce those affiliations.
Yes.
And make that permanent as opposed to temporary.
Absolutely. And one of the approaches that I see is trying to partner externally outside of DJJ, partner with some of the community partners to help in this effort, because it takes a village. These kids are our future, and we want to invest in them, and trying to get the community engaged and had a vested interest in that is going to be key.
My concern here is that I don't see any of that in this budget.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing in the recommendations of this budget for 2021 that moves us towards an evidence-based return on investment spent on trying to deal with that renunciation. So going forward, I think it's going to be important for your work to, for DJJ to work on. The second thing is that, closing or not pushing forward on a transition center in Gwinnett County has me very concerned, because that's what we need to be doing, is transitioning folks back into their communities. And by cutting that, I'm concerned that you're not providing for that time from when you're coming out of a facility back into the community, and that's when they're vulnerable. You know, you have them renounce gang affiliation, then they go right back in the same community with the same pressures that they had before that probably pushed them into the life of either being in a gang or into criminal activity. And so those two things are very concerning. And I think it's important. I hope that you'll look at it going forward and come up with some good practices that may be implemented across the board for the youth of our state.
Yes, sir.
I have one question. Chairman Ballinger or Chairman Belton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really do appreciate what your work, Commissioner. I think Frederick Douglass said that it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. So I do appreciate y'all really are doing the Lord's work, and I hate that we're having to do cuts at all here. I did notice that this is similar to many of the commissioners that come up to us. Is you've made overall a 5.4% cut in the general budget, but the administration was cut by only 1/1000th of a point. Can you talk to me about that?
And looking at and most of our cuts are coming from vacant positions that were vacant for 2 years, and I think that's the majority of our cuts once you take out the Sumter. And so we try to, when we're looking at it as far as going into these cuts, we try to make it as to not impact staff, existing staff that are in positions.
But the administration is being cut almost none at all in this budget. Is that correct, sir?
Well, we've cut some in the administration, and I think in some of them it's going to be in some of our upper management positions, like a deputy commissioner, program coordinators, but they fell in different programming, but they weren't in.
But could some of these administration people be doing these other jobs, or they're being in YDC and community service?
Depends on which positions where the current skill level they're at, if they can or not.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. One more question. Let's keep it short. We got to get back on schedule.
Yes, sir. Can you tell us for the 2021 budget how many total positions will be unfilled?
That's right here. Our current vacancies right now is 1,275, 1,275.
And how, if you were at full strength, what would you have?
That would be it. Full strength?
Right, like if all of the positions were filled, what is your number? 1,275 is a vacancy, so what would be the total work population?
About over 4,000. If you take Sumter out, I think our total employee count would be 3,579.
Okay.
Sir?
So there's should be 4,000 people.
Yeah, so
There's 12, so there's 5 missing, so not 50%, but.
and that's total. That's total. That's not security or non-security. So once Sumter,
It's a pretty strong percentage.
It is.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And it seems to me, a final comment is, while I definitely appreciate trying to raise some of the lower salaries, it seems what's missing from this conversation is the impact of all these vacancies on the workload of your existing force and how that impacts turnover.
Mm-hmm.
That goes to your point earlier about the overtime. If you're working at, what is the normal, what's the shift, the normal shift, 12 hours?
12-hour shifts in our
So-
facilities.
And so if you're looking at an overtime of 4 additional hours that individuals may be working longer, then that is going to have an impact on your burnout rate. So you're going to have people that are leaving the job, salary is low, they may be making it up through overtime, but eventually that's going to wear on them.
Yes, sir.
And Gravely.
Just a real quick question. What is the age group of individuals within the department that you're overseeing? Not
Between
personnel.
13 and 21.
Between 13 and 21.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner, thank you very much. We appreciate you and your staff's presentation. Thank you for grabbing those numbers for us while we're on the fly. If you would, I do want to get those numbers of secured for each facility and then the numbers of the beds for each facility.
Okay.
And then if you have a population for each facility, that would be good. I know that
I do.
I know the average. I mean, people
Yeah, I
going in
can
and out.
pull them
so
up.
yeah.
That'll be easy to get to you. I
Okay.
can email them to you as soon as we get done here.
That sounds great. If you'll just send them to Courtney, that'd be
Courtney,
perfect.
okay.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate you being here, and thank you for your service to the state. And Commissioner Oliver, you have done remarkably well with your staff, given that you guys just started a few months ago. So
Yes, sir.
getting your head around it all and being prepared for the budget hearings, we appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next on our agenda is the Department of Public Safety. Colonel McDonough joins us as the commissioner, and we're happy to have you, sir. They say I have a cold heart, so that's, I'm sorry I'm radiating that. He's not, he can do it.
Yeah, he's not the problem.
What we'll do is we'll just pick up from the, I think we're gonna look at the amended very quickly and run through that again, and then we'll pick up on the full. So we'll do the same thing as we did with DJJ, go through the amended quickly and then back to the full. Obviously, we're hearing a lot about vacancy positions, so that's probably the numbers we'll be looking for throughout the request. But Colonel, thank you for being here today.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll start off with aviation on page 20 of 22. This is 39-1.2, and it's reduced funds associated with the Albany and Augusta hangars due to our consolidation efforts. I can report that we've already sold 2 of the 3 helicopters. We've turned one into the federal government after we've cannibalized everything that we put into it. So we've tried to get all the parts that we paid for, off of it. And then we've yet to get our 182 turned in, but that's in the works. So by idling down Albany and Augusta, essentially how that figure came about was when we started in October, they took the ROE of that particular facility and looked at what could be done to save in those funds and took a 75% of that figure, and that's how we came up with that $30,000 savings. Reduced funds for 2 vacant positions, $132,947. Those are 2 mechanics positions. When you're reducing your fleet by 4 aircraft, hopefully you won't have much use of too many mechanics with a smaller fleet. And then the reduced operating expenses is taking a look at the amount of ROE overall, and then 75% for a net to the program of $184,541. The next is Department Administration, 39-3.2. The reduction of operating expenses was the same thing, taking a look at ROE with the 19 base and then a 10% of that to come up with $35,166. And a reductions for 1 vacant position, that's in our budget position, that's an analyst position to the tune of $50,494. So a program net in the administration of $75,790. Field offices and services, 39-4.2, reducing operating expenses. And the same method was used, taking the 19 base of all of the regular operating expenses, removing those expenses that we can't reduce beyond any of our efficiencies, such as our uniforms and our gas consumption, basically the beans, bullets, types of approach. And then taking 10% of that was $379,338. 39-4.3, reduce funds by freezing vacant position. It's $4,730,069. Essentially, that number was backed into by coming up with the remaining, the 4% cuts. So a total net to the field services program, which is essentially the State Patrol Division, is $4,978,009. Motor Carrier Compliance Division.
Commissioner, let's,
Yes, sir.
on that, how many, I know you backed in, the mathematics backed in, was it 43 or was it 53 positions that are being frozen out of field services?
That dollar figure, if you remove from the total, the ROE, if you use kind of our standard person and you just talk about sworn, there are many different positions that are in that, Mr. Chairman, as you know, but if you equate it just to our basic run-of-the-mill experienced trooper, that's essentially 47 trooper positions for that dollar figure.
And you had told us at the last hearing that you had a number of, looking at the overall cuts in the amended budget, you had some total number of, and it's numerical. I understand that the calculation is make a 4% cut or a 6% cut, and then we translate that into positions after the fact. So, but you had some essential positions that you did not want to see cut, and I want to make sure that I get those numbers straight.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if you would go through those total number of positions, and then which ones that you need to keep in place.
Yes, sir. In field ops, we have essentially 4 critical areas. The first is 50 trooper cadets for the 109th School. They're scheduled to start school next Sunday. We have 35 dispatcher positions that we consider critical, 5 secretarial positions, and then 12 additional sworn positions that are essentially supervision within the post structure.
And so those are positions that you are maintaining as funded, but they are vacant. The trooper school will be filled up pretty quickly.
Yes, sir.
But that leaves us with the 35, the 5, and the 12 that are vacant, but you are looking to fill them. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir. As we have people retire or there's attrition or discipline, that's the reason for the people that are in school moving in to fill those full-time positions.
And the 47 positions, though, those are not none of the 47 are part of those critical positions you just listed, the 50, the 35, the 5, and the 12.
Correct.
And what was the base salary plus benefits for your dispatchers that you're bringing in?
Hold on just a minute.
Because you told me that before, and it was also strikingly low, and I think you had indicated that you were losing them after investing in them and training them. They would move on to other county E911 facilities.
We're looking it up now, sir. The dispatcher one, the started for that is $24,291.75. The market midpoint for that dispatcher one is $29,150.10.
And you bring them in and train them, and how much do you know about how much it costs us to train them?
We do that all on the job. Our dispatchers literally start working in our communication center. We now have an additional expense where they have to, go to the training center now and actually get a post-certification for that. And it takes about 6 months to bring that person online. But a dollar figure equated to that, it's nothing more than their salary and time that's, spent in there. But to have an exact figure to that, I don't have that, sir. We can get that to you. We can make an estimate of that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Chairman Clark.
On that, it would be about 12,000 if it's 6 months, correct? I mean, if it's
Yes, sir.
24, but you're also paying the trainer, and it's half a year of their time as well. So
The trainer is their supervisor. Each comm center has a chief radio operator and 3 senior radio operators, and those are the folks that are doing the training with the new person that comes into the communications center.
right. So I mean, it's going to be a little bit uptick from the 6 months of that person's individual income. So,
Yes, sir.
and if they're, I was writing numbers, so I might have missed this, but what's the turnover rate for those how long before they turn over for the dispatchers? Because I mean, it looks like immediately once they're trained, they could go make 5,000 more in one of the other areas.
That's correct, sir. Our dispatcher attrition rate for fiscal year 18 was 26.18, and for fiscal year 19, it was 22.84. The snapshot that I have thus far as of January of this year, it's down to 17.77.
Any reason for that? Like why the downtick?
I think we've done a good job recruiting folks, and so I think we're on an upswing, and so I think that's where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Continue, sir. Thank you. Oh, we have another question. Chairman Lunsford.
Just, do you have any figures on those that come in at the operator level? How many of them actually progress to trooper?
It used to be a standard thing. When we had our communications folks in the post, that was the standard. You know, we had folks that would come and spend 2 or 3 years on the radio and go on to trooper school. It's not the norm anymore. We actually have very, very few dispatchers that go to trooper school. It's just a handful for class. So if we have a class that starts about 50, it's only about 2 or 3 now dispatchers that are actually going to school from communications.
Okay. Weird. Thank you.
And then what's your attrition on the trooper school?
How far you want me to go back, sir?
Just recent, just the last couple
All right.
of years.
The 108th Trooper School, which graduated.
I don't want you to go back too far.
Okay. I can go all the way back to the 99th if you'd like me to, but the 108th that just graduated, sir, that was in May of this year. We started 43 and graduated 32 for a 25.6% attrition rate. So that is our goal. Our goal is to try to graduate at least 75% of where we started. The school just before that, the 107th, it graduated in January of this year. 60% of the class graduated. We had a 40% attrition rate.
And that's the goal is 75%, but you usually stay right underneath that, about 60, 70.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The previous schools to that was 67.3 and 62.1.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Motor Carrier Compliance Division, those are the folks that are doing the regulatory function of essentially the MCSAP plan here in the state. That division came to us in 2005, and we are the responsible agency for those commercial motor vehicle regulations here in the state. 39.5.2, a reduction of funds by eliminating vacant weighmaster positions. 18 positions were designated for that cut, and it's $760,617. And then the same approach was used for operating expenses, and that was $77,065 for a net to the program of $823,631.
Okay. So looking at the to recap on, well, go ahead and do your Officer of Public Safety Support.
Okay. The Office of Public Safety Support, under the reduced funds for 2 positions. Initially, there was money in the budget for an assistant director. And I asked Director Reynolds for a particular person from the GBI. Wes Horn is an individual that's been involved in their peer support program. Wes has a big heart and really has a propensity for this type of work. And so the director was very gracious to give us Wes as that deputy director and to keep his funds. So part of that $222,000 are funds that essentially are being paid for by the GBI in that number 2 position. The other is we had 2 administrative assistants for the program. And so we looked at that and felt that 1 was all that we needed for that. So the other bulk of those reductions is reducing that 1 administrative assistant. And so as they're getting started, when we moved into the reduction of operating expenses, our intent there is not to shut that down, but to take a look at where we were in the hiring and where their capabilities are and essentially the money that had not been spent. So the first part of that is the ROE of $11,625, and the reduction in funds is to reflect the delayed starting dates of the people we were trying to hire. So the intent here is in no way to raid that fund. It's just those are funds that have not been spent till this point in hiring the people for that division. So that was a net to the program of $503,745.
All right, and to recap on this, and I appreciate you saying that because that was important to
Yes, sir.
members in the House, and I know it was important to you.
It is, sir.
So just to recap, how many, in terms of total sworn positions, how many total sworn positions will be vacant and funded in the amended budget?
I'd be about 64, sir. If you
Six-
look at where we are as of January the 31st, we had 809 folks, and the amount of folks that we have on the list for retirement, that 860 number that you and I has always talked about, specific to the patrol, it's about 62, sir.
62?
Yes, sir.
And that's taking into consideration the frozen positions, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Other questions about the amended? I don't see any, so we'll move on to the full budget.
I got a different folder for that.
Me too.
This is on page 21 of 23. Back to aviation, 39.1.2. The increase of funds to provide for a $1,000 pay raise to full-time regular employees with current salaries below $40,000. That applied to our secretary that was there, just one person in that particular section of our agency. Reduce funds for the Albany and Augusta hangars due to the consolidation of facilities in the same way that the numbers were figured for the amended. Instead of 75% of that figure, it was all of the base when we looked at that. But it's an idling down, so they took a look at how we were moving out of that, and that's how they came up with $30,917. Reduce funds for 2 vacant positions due to the consolidation of facilities in the same manner. We've got 2 mechanic positions at $177,263. The reduction of operating expenses was ROE, and it was 100%. And then of that figure from the 2019 base, and then 10% of that to come up with a $31,649. And then reduced funds associated with the reduction of the agency fleet of $160,319, with a net reduction of 4 aircraft in the agency, spending hopefully less money on maintenance, less money on fuel. Although some of the hours of the other aircraft will be consolidated into our others, it looks like we should be able to save about $160,319. That is a program net of $400,097, essentially almost a 9% cut to aviation. Departmental administration increased funds to provide $100,000 pay raise to full-time regular employees was $30,569. In our administration, there were 20 individuals, 3 accounting personnel, 8 open records, 5 HR, 1 IT, 2 secretaries, and 1 graphic artist that will be the recipients of that pay raise. The reduction of operating expenses in the same fashion of the amended, and ended up being $46,888, and then reduce funds by eliminating 1 vacant position. That's a budget analyst, essentially at $50,494 for a total of $64,265. Field offices, 39.4.2, increased funds. $1,000 pay raise for those that are under $40,000 was $470,178. In our field ops, that equates to 268 employees in field ops. 99 dispatchers. Actually, let me break that down. Dispatcher 1s are 36, dispatcher 2s are 64, dispatcher 3s are 41. 54 post secretaries, 10 troop division secretaries, 2 criminal intel analysts, 1 facilities engineer, 2 licensed techs, 3 mechanics, 1 paralegal, 20 headquarters cadets, 1 supply purchase assistants, 2 telecommunications techs, and 32 cadets that are in trooper school. Reduce funds by freezing vacant positions of $3,178,733. That's essentially the same method that was done. So if you equate that, like we said, to that midline, Mr. Chairman, that's essentially 31 or 32 positions. But it also takes into account essentially providing funds for the 110th Trooper School, which starts late August, early September timeframe.
So is that the 31 positions that you're losing in the 21 budget? Are those some of the critical positions that you already mentioned to us before? So you had mentioned that we had, in terms of field ops, there were 50 trooper school cadets that there were 35 dispatchers, 5 secretaries, and 12 additional sworn supervisors. And so we're going to make an additional cut in positions of 31 under this recommended budget. So how is that squaring with your critical?
Actually, not so much. It's a continuation of the same, but
Okay.
time keeps on ticking. And in that, we're doing the same aspect of as people leave during that time period, starting the next school to fill those. So right now, we've had, this fiscal year, we've had 47 retirees. We don't know what that's going to be by the end of the year. On average, we retire between 50 and 60 folks. The year before that was 62. So with 47, we're on pace to exceed that 60 if history continues, the way it normally goes. Last year, we were very fortunate. We only had 49 retirees. But we've already reached that 47 at this point, and we tend to have retirement waves that occur in that December timeframe before the holidays, and then just prior to the end of the fiscal year, before July 1st. So we usually are pretty good at that, but this year, being where we are, I couldn't tell you exactly what that's going to be.
So the 31 positions, are those accounted for in your retirements already, or are those anticipated retirements?
Anticipated retirement, sir. The reducing of operating expenses is the same way that was done for the amended with the ROE, with the base, and then 10% of $2,741,925. We are trying to institute efficiencies in order to minimize the impact of all of this. You've heard some of the things that have been done in other places as far as training. We're doing the same thing. We're trying to send our trainers and our adjunct folks that are already in the fields to do firearms training per troop instead of sending them to Forsyth. We've put a 50% moratorium on out-of-state travel. Right now, we're tracking that we're above that. We're at about 56% of that goal. We're actually exceeding it. And we've also instituted a 10% reduction in RPO purchases, and we're right on track with that. So whatever we can do to try to minimize the impact of these things with efficiencies, we're attempting to do.
How much money are you saving by not sending troopers to trooper school for firearms training in Forsyth, for example? And just in total, how much are you going to save by not sending them to Forsyth or to any of the gypstick programs?
I'd have to I have to take a look at it. I don't have an exact number to tell you. I can give it, for instance, on the out-of-state travel. If we stick with that percentage that we have, that's going to be close to a $600,000 savings just in that moratorium on out-of-state travel.
So, but typically what you would do is pay gypstick so it'd be an interagency transfer, is that right? Between public safety and gypstick to pay for those training sessions? No,
sir. The training center is very, very good to us.
Okay.
As part of the umbrella of public safety, we have some associated costs, as you know, at Trooper School, but the cost to us to use facilities at the training center is minimal. It's just our cost to get there. So instead of bringing everybody to a centralized location, some of the people having to carpool, up to 3 hours, we're putting that type of firearms training at a local range in each troop. And so we have adjunct instructors. In other words, firearms instructors that they're troopers that are in the field. Instead of bringing them to Forsyth and having those gas costs, then they're just going to a local range in the area, and those are the instructors that are doing that annual requirement. Those are the type of things we're trying to do for efficiencies.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Motor carrier compliance, 39.5.1. The increased funds for the pay raise of $1,000 ends up being $98,985. That's 66 people in the motor carrier division, 8 secretaries, 34 weight inspectors, 6 compliance specialists, 4 customer service reps, 6 financial op generalists, 3 scale technicians, and 2 facility engineers, along with 3 cadets. Provide funds for operating expenses to support motor carrier operations. You can see an increase there of $431,663 to go along with line 39.5.4. Provide funds for personal services to support motor carrier officer position, an increase of $1.3 million and some change. Now, the point of those two things is we had an agreement with the port. The Port Authority provided about $6.6 million a year, and so those are the replacement for that port in state funds, and then we're to utilize our UCR funds that we receive and collect on an annual basis to make up the difference.
Are we paying the motor carrier compliance division with transportation funds from motor fuel taxes?
I think you saw in the DOT's presentation, sir, that state funds were being replaced with, I believe it was just over $15 million from HB 170. I think everybody's familiar with the DOT bill a few years back where there was a restructure that provided a significant amount of money to the DOT in their budget. And I think that's what the intended purpose is.
But in the past, we have not done that. This is a new new change, right?
It is, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. How much in the UCR funds are we looking at here? Is that 1.3 million? But how much of that?
2.6 million is traditionally what we collect in UCR funds. We already have folks that are assigned to those funds to the tune of about $600,000. So it would provide $2 million of additional funds on an annual basis. It's an interesting system that works every year. We've been delayed the past couple of years with court rulings on when to collect, how much to collect, and we're getting a little late start on it this year because of that. Our collection efforts have started this month. Traditionally, by this time, we've already collected it. Normally, that occurs in December, but it's been delayed this year.
So why is it? Is that why it's a difference? But you have some expenses that go to 600,000, but you got a balance of 700,000 thereabouts.
That's correct, sir.
And that's just a delay in recovery?
No, I mean, you end up collecting 1 year for what you have for the next. So it's as long as we don't have, if it doesn't push into the next fiscal year, we will have collected what we need. And that's another thing, too. It's also a fund source, Mr. Chairman, that we're looking to the feds because of the performance of how well the Motor Carrier Compliance Division has done nationally. Also because of our population has gone from 9th in the country to 8th, as well as the last 2 years. We've had 3,000 new carriers in the state last year and 2,000 new carriers the year before that. The growth in our state, particularly with commercial motor vehicles, we're asking if we can have a bigger chunk of that. Now, we don't know whether that's going to occur, but the fact is we're asking for it.
Okay. Let me ask about, I got a few questions about your sworn officer ratios in the state comparison as it compares to nationwide, but Representative Williams has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Colonel.
How are you, Mr. Dow?
All righty. Listen, there were a couple of things earlier that you were talking about that causing me pause and some concern. I see we've started to pinch HB 170 to supplement where we never intended these funds to go. And from 2007, when everything kind of plunged off the table, most of the fat was gone, and we were able to do some salary increases of a significant nature for your sworn officers, things that were really good for morale. And I'm concerned because of the difference in 2007 and 2020. If you live where I live, you know what the port has done to the truck traffic.
Yes, sir.
I have not noticed a significant uptick in sworn officers with the motor carrier division, in spite of this huge increase. And when I'm riding down the road, having been born and raised around semis, but mostly pulpwood and log trucks, who historically have had problems with brakes and other little things, are we just putting off the inevitable when we have all of this truck traffic, all these problems on the road, and now we're being pinched to not move accordingly with the increase in truck traffic? It worries me because every time I ride down the road, I get worried when I see semi or pulpwood truck, and I look at some of them and the fender is jumping. I said, now if you let your body go like that, I know what's happening to your brakes. What's the consequences for this penny saved down the road when $1 comes due?
In actuality, when we started the Port Authority, the number of motor carrier officers that we had on the road were just over 200. And so when that initiative was started 2014, 2015, we were able to actually increase that to about 268. And it was specific to that corridor. It was specific to I-95, I-16, and then the impact in and around Metro Atlanta here. So the fact is during that period of time, we've actually been able to significantly increase the folks that are in that effort. And what we have seen, although it is small, we have seen a reduction in the fatalities where we've moved from 4th in the nation to 5th in the nation when it comes to commercial motor vehicles. So we've got the needle going at least in the right direction. It's not, it's not huge, but at least we're moving it in the right direction. But, I'd like to pinch a little bit more of that, what you're talking about. But I think the effort is, when you think of what DOT does and you look at the picture of the building of infrastructure, the motor carrier's role is to try to minimize the impact on that infrastructure. Because when it comes to weight and when it comes to axle weight, when you are regulating that and you are keeping that, with inside the ground, so where it needs to be, you're minimizing the impact, hopefully, to the infrastructure and then the dollars that would have to be spent, to replace that infrastructure. So I think it does go hand in glove.
Commissioner, at line 39.5.4, is that a raise that says provide funds for personal services to support motor carrier officer position? What was that? What is that?
It's not a raise, Mr. Chairman. It's part of the dollar figure to replace the port agreement that is going away. The port agreement was a little over $6.6 million a year. So the combination of that, the combination of 39.5.2 of the 431,663, and then the use of the remaining UCR funds is to try to make up that port agreement going away.
Why is it going away? Why is the port agreement expiring? And what did, and just explain to me again why we had an agreement to begin with.
I think everybody remembers the accident that took the lives of the 5 nurses from Statesboro on I-16. Out of that was the initiative to look for additional funds other than state funds to support an increase of enforcement. That agreement lasted 4 years, and then it was extended for another year. And so that agreement had an ending, and then the mindset was at that time that would be replaced with either other funds or state funds, hence what's being done here.
Okay. And then looking back at the ratios, I was looking at the FBI, the criminal Department of Justice through the FBI puts out criminal justice information reporting data on sworn officers, and they do a nationwide average. And I was just looking at seeing what the nationwide average was, and in 2018, which is the most recent kind of certified numbers, sworn officers per 1,000 inhabitants was about 2.4 nationwide. In Georgia, we seem to be trending in the right direction, which we were at 2.7 per 1,000 in terms of our population. That's up from 2015, which was we were at 2.5 at that time. Are you seeing more officers coming into play since the pay increases and retention better for the department? And does that contribute to the fact that we're looking stronger in terms of our ratios of officers, sworn officers per 1,000 inhabitants?
Whenever you do a pay raise, I think the comment was made by Representative Bruce with his HR experience. Pay raises have about a 2-year window, and that's pretty much what we saw. Our attrition rate amongst our sworn folks in fiscal year 2016 was 12.33%. I think if folks remember, there was actually a 6% pay raise that was initially given in fiscal year 17, July the 1st, and then an additional 20, January the 1st in that year. And it dropped our attrition rate from 12.33 to 5.29. And then as you move away from that pay raise in the subsequent years, in fiscal year 18 and 19, you actually see the attrition rate go to 7.38% and then 8.53%. So as we move farther away, we're actually seeing our attrition rate go up. The national average per 100,000 residents for state troopers is, if my memory serves me correct, is actually 23. When you look at the number of officers in the state, I think it's important to look at specifically what they're doing. Because they're not all doing traffic enforcement. And so with our numbers, we actually have one of the smaller state patrol agencies in traffic enforcement in the country.
What was the turnover rate prior to the 2017 6% plus 20%?
12.33%.
And then I was noticing that in terms of our neighboring states, Alabama has a ratio of 2.2 sworn officers per 1,000. Florida's at 2.2 as well. Georgia's at 2.7. North Carolina's at 2.3. South Carolina's at 2.5, and Tennessee at 2.6. So we seem to be leading in terms of that ratio number across the board. And I know that's inclusive of state patrol, but it's also inclusive of the sheriff's departments and the city police departments and any county police departments. But it was striking to me to see that ratio had gone down for all of our sister states, had gone up for us as a statewide in terms of law enforcement, which I thought that was positive for the public safety across the state of Georgia. And I was just noticing that. I didn't know if you'd seen those trends as well. Representative Ballinger, is that Ballinger? No, Belton.
Thank you, Chairman. Just curious. So overall, the amended budget, you cut that by about 4%, Colonel. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
And then on the large budget, about 3.5%. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
Just curious. And again, I asked the former commissioner. Is administration was cut very little? It's about $9.5 million, and then the amended budget is cut by 1/1,000th. And then the big budget is cut by 1/1,000th. Could any of those folks in the administration be working in the field?
I think we've got one of the smaller command staffs of folks that are around us. We had one vacant position in that analyst position in our budgeting, and so that's where the cut came from, sir.
Okay. No further questions for you, Colonel. We appreciate you being here and staff being here as well. What we'll do is take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and finish up with the GBI. We've done a lot of work with them on, I think it was Thursday or Wednesday, I'm sorry. So we'll pick up with them on in just a few minutes. So let's plan on being back here at 11:50, and we'll start back up on that. Thank you, sir. All right, well, Al's reminding me we need to get started. So let's move on to Director Reynolds. We're happy to have you and Ms. Buck here and your staff. Thank you for joining us again. I know we took a long time last week. And so there was a couple of things I think we had gotten through forensic services. We spent a lot of time on that. We're gonna go back to that in the big budget. I did want to just go back and touch on the Criminal Justice Information Services 30.2. When we were talking about that, and I'm going to go back to the Bureau of Administration as well, because there was a couple of things I wanted to check with you on that. On Jesus, that there were several positions that I think we had that did auditing for for background checks and auditing for local data being put in to our database for fingerprint checks and my understanding is that those positions that were doing that auditing to ensure that information was correct, those positions have been eliminated. Is that correct?
Basically, Mr. Chairman, what we've recommended is there be two vacant positions that are frozen that we will not be filling. Let me explain what those are. One is what we call a CJIS, Criminal Justice Information Assistance Compliance Specialist. We're mandated by law, Mr. Chairman, to conduct compliance audits every 3 years for criminal justice agencies. I know most of you know they're very particular on how you operate GCIC, and we want to make sure that everybody's doing that correctly. So the FBI requires us to audit those individuals or agencies every 3 years. So we're actually freezing one of those positions, and that staff currently is funded by 8 individuals. So if we lose that one position, that'll fund us, put us back at 7 or a 13% reduction in that compliance staffing. That's one position. The second position is a CJIS analyst. That person is basically to provide support to local agencies. So, for example, if you're in Cobb County and you say, hey, we need some help in how we run GCIC, how we enter information, then one of our CJIS analysts would provide support. They could physically go to Cobb County. They could stay in the building and receive phone calls for that. But that particular division of CJIS has a staff of 11, and so if we lose one of those persons, that'll be a 9% reduction down to 10. So those are the two positions that we're talking about freezing in FY20.
The concern that I have with this recommendation is that when we talk about the criminal records that individuals have, it has an impact, at least in my mind, on at least 3 different areas. One, it has an impact to the individual. So if that information is not put in correctly, then in our GCIC system, then that creates a criminal background record for an individual that may not be accurate. And so that's why you have auditors to review that and check that data, and you also have an analyst to assist with the input of the information. In addition to that, this impacts our law enforcement officers in the field. If that data is not correct or is late in getting inputted in the system, then my concern is for individual patrol officers that are on the beat and they pull over someone and the warrant isn't logged in correctly, or the background about their criminal activity is not accurate or up to date and inputted in a timely fashion, then that officer is placed in harm's way without having necessary information that may affect how that officer approaches an individual that he's pulled over in a way that may be detrimental to his or her safety. So I am really concerned about those cuts in that regard. Then in addition, FBI, or the equivalent for our GCIC system, I understand that this information that we're inputting is also uploaded into an FBI database. Is that correct?
NCIC.
NCIC. Mm-hmm. So now that information may or may not be accurate as it goes up at the federal level. So those those three elements of this to me are very important. And the final one is that our judicial system, without having the correct background information inputted in a timely fashion, also adversely impacts the ability of judges, prosecutors to do their job relevant to the prosecution of cases for those who may have a warrant outstanding, who may have a background that shows a propensity for continued behavior that would violate our criminal justice system. So I'm greatly concerned about these two positions being lost. And am I missing anything in what I've just stated about the impacts?
Well, I certainly understand the concern, and you know, having dealt with that information on virtually every aspect, and by that I mean being a former beat cop, you know, being a former judge, former defense attorney representing folks, and a former prosecutor. In fact, I told somebody I've been everything in the courtroom, Representative Williams, except the defendant. I'm going to keep it that way if I can. And so, but I certainly understand your concern. But let me, if I can alleviate some of it, what I would ask you to remember is GCIC is basically a repository. And so the information that we spit out to judges, to police officers, to attorneys representing individuals is only as good as the information that we have received. What our auditors do most of the time is, for example, when I was a district attorney, they would come to the DA's office and they would go back and they would check when we were on GCIC to make sure that we were on GCIC for appropriate purposes, not necessarily what the clerk's office was putting in to GCIC, but making sure that the people who functionally used it day in and day out weren't using it for some reason they shouldn't. For example, and let's say hypothetically you're a police officer and you see somebody, I want to know who that person is. So you run that person on GCIC and you say, oh, that's so-and-so, because I may be interested in meeting that person. Years ago when I was a police officer, I'm not going to sit here and say that was done, but it ain't done anymore. And that's what these auditors do, is they prevent that type of circumstance from happening. Are they across the board perfect? Of course not. There may be some circumstances where it's used when it shouldn't. So it's not so much a check on information that a clerk's office, which is the entity that's responsible for entering it, is doing, as opposed to making sure that the people who are using it correctly.
Is there any check on the clerk's office to do spot checks to determine if the data being input is accurate?
My understanding is we do that some as well. But if you remember, one of the things that we're reducing in this budget is this disposition recovery project. That was something that the Bureau had taken on its own volition to go out to clerks' offices that were behind in their information, and we would send out, it was temporary, temp employees, we would send them out and we would pay them to assist that particular clerk's office. And so that's a function that, again, in spirit of disclosure and candor, that's not a function statutorily the GBI ought to be doing. You know, in a perfect world, if we had a ton of money and a ton of folks, then we would send them out and say, we'll help you guys do that. But so that's something we're going to be cutting out as well. So that concerns me again too, you know, whether or not those particular counties are going to get further behind in the entry of that information. But yeah, there are some checks. The auditors have the ability to check anybody, any agency that uses GCIC, clerks, DAs, sheriffs, police departments, various state agencies. So if you have the authority to use a GCIC, our auditors have the authority to audit you.
Could we recover some of the cost that for those two positions, or positions that we relative to inputting data and ensuring the fidelity of that data being placed into GCIC? Could we capture some of that back by increasing the cost of fingerprinting? Last year, the year before, that we passed legislation that would allow for the agency to charge some flat rates to collect from other agencies that deal with licensing for fingerprinting, licensing or employment. That was a way to try to capture back costs for the wrap back system that we placed in. Is there another way that we can try to recapture some of that money back and fund these positions that we're losing?
I think there's always an option of looking at what we call user fees, you know, fees that we charge to do various things for individuals and for private sector folks, not state agencies, but private sector groups running histories and things of that nature. I think that's always has some flexibility and perhaps a discussion of raising that for the purposes of bringing in more funds.
And do you have a recommendation on where we might increase those user fees so that we can increase the appropriations that we need to try to help offset some of these cuts?
I could sit down with my GCIC folks and get a list of what every item is they have particular charges for and supply that to the committee relatively quickly.
Okay, that'd be helpful.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And then I think we left you at Regional Investigative Services was where you were when
That's
we left
correct.
off. So.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's 30.4.2 in the amended 20 budget. There's a reduction in this area in the investigative section of the Bureau by reducing 12 current vacant sworn positions. 8 of those are in regional offices around the state, 4 in what we call our regional drug enforcement offices. Also, the reduction by eliminating 4 non-sworn positions, a programmer, a forensic financial auditor, that's an individual who would be in our FIU or financial investigative unit, and the 2 SORB intel analysts that I spoke about last week. SORB is a function, again, that was assigned to the Bureau legislatively after the Sexual Offender Review Board initially had it. I have had discussions with that director of that board. They want that information back or that job back, and so those 2 intel analysts would be, in fact, sent back to that particular board, and we'd be losing those positions. There'd be some hiring and delays for newly appropriated positions, and that would total up to be a reduction in the budget of about $1.6 million.
Okay, let's go on to the full budget.
Right. Thank you. In FY21,
we're on page 14 of your track sheet.
Yeah, I apologize. That's 30.1.1. That would be initially the statewide changes. They would be first one would be in a reflection of an adjustment to cyber security insurance premiums for DOAS of about $7,000. 1.2 is a reduction in funds that returns to the budget about $221,000. That's because GTA, our technology authority administrative fees, have actually given us better rates in FY21, so we'll be returning to the budget that amount. 0.1.3 is the $1,000 pay raise to full-time regular employees. We have 128 of those in the Bureau that qualify for that. That's an amount of $196,000. And 0.2.1 is a reduction in funds because we, believe it or not, we actually have a couple of folks in the teacher retirement system, so that's a very small amount being returned to the budget. So those are the only statewide changes affecting the Bureau. I moved directly into administration. I do want to point out, I know Representative Belton asked me last week and I wasn't prepared to answer the question. I apologize. He was asking me about the percentages or the number of cuts that we made in administration. I do want both Representative Belton and the committee to know that the changes or reductions we're making in administration percentage-wise is about 2%, 2% change to administration because we do our best to run very, very lean. That's the same actual reduction that we'll be showing in forensic sciences, a little bit less than our investigative section and considerably less than CGIS, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I did want the representative to know, because I know he did pose that to me last week, and I apologize I wasn't prepared for that, to reflect that it was in fact a 2% reduction in administration. Totally, that's reflected by, first of all, in 0.1.4, a reduction by decreasing traveling costs like every other agency is doing. We're just trying to make sure that if we go anywhere, somebody else pays for it, or if we go somewhere it's within the state and it's a quick turnaround time. 0.1.5 is a reduction of funds by freezing 2 vacant positions. That's a legal secretary and a financial accounts receivable position, and that will return to the budget some $176,000.
Director, on the Bureau Administration, it's a 2% cut, but what was it under the fiscal year 2020 budget? Because those vary. We should have a 4% out of 2020, and then a 2% going into 2022, which would be built on for a total of 6.
Yeah, we're actually, with the governor's recommendation, Mr. Chairman, we're looking at a 3% reduction in our total budget for fiscal, for the amended FY20, and we're looking at a 5% reduction in FY21. Ours doesn't quite reach up to the 6%, 4% and 6% recommended by the governor.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'll move directly into the Criminal Justice Information Systems. That's CJIS. We frequently in the Bureau refer to that as the GCIC. Point 2.4 is a replacement of state funds with other existing funds. As I explained last week, one of the things that I was charged to do in coming into the director's position is to look at every project or item that the Bureau was doing to determine if any were outside of the scope statutorily of what the GBI is supposed to do. The disposition recovery project, as I mentioned a moment ago, is something that is outside of the scope statutorily of what the GBI does. We were removing that project. That's where we go out and assist other clerks' offices in entering information from GCIC or to GCIC if they're behind. It also eliminates positions from SORB that I talked about a moment ago. An elimination of 6 positions, 5 a carryover from from fiscal year 20, and 1 additional position, and all of those savings together would result in a $1.4 million reduction to the budget. Point 2.5 is the reduction by the 2 vacant positions that I explained in amended FY20. It's the same 2 positions, and that for a full year would return to the budget $152,000. Moving down into forensic sciences, that is a crime lab. As you will recall from our discussion last week under point 3.3, there's a reduction in FY20 of 3 scientist positions, 2 vacant lab techs, and 2 additional positions. Those would carry over from FY20, and in addition to that, we would be eliminating 6 additional vacant science positions, either through resignations or retirements. That would put us at a total reduction in the forensic sciences in the science department of 9 positions through FY21.
Representative Williams has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Help me with the 9 positions that you said were vacant. Now, for several years, we talked about sometimes the difficulty of getting scientists on board and how badly they were needed. Why now are we able to eliminate 9 when we were always a little behind in what we needed?
Well, I think a couple of reasons, Representative. One is that we currently today, and I'll give you some numbers so you'll know exactly what we're looking at in the Bureau. As of last week, and I apologize, I didn't run these numbers over the weekend, but when we spoke last week, we have 154 scientists currently working at the GBI Crime Lab, and those are not only headquarters, that's our 5 small labs too around the state. We have 29 vacant positions of scientists, but out of those 29, 9 are currently funded to be hired, and so we're under recruitment, and I expect those 9 to be hired, bringing us up to 163 scientists. In looking at what we could do to eliminate or cut into a backlog, which we have at the lab, I began looking at the history of what the Bureau has done in coming to this committee year after year and patiently asking for additional scientists, and this committee responding and giving scientists in the governor's office doing that as well. And then I looked at when we come back year after year, despite asking for that, we still have a backlog. The backlog has grown some. It's fluctuated up and down if you look over the years, but we still have it. And so I began a process of trying to determine what we can do outside of the normal operations of asking for scientists, getting some scientists, still having a backlog. And I came to a conclusion that respectfully, the Bureau, and particularly the lab, needs to do things a little differently. And by that I mean they're in a position, the lab is, the scientists, and I know I've seen it from a judge's perspective and from a prosecutor and a defense lawyer's perspective. They do tremendous work at the lab and have the ability to do cutting edge technology, but we're inundated with 77% of our requests coming from one or two areas, drug cases or DNA cases. So what I want to do is be able to look at those drug cases, which 90% of the time don't result in a trial. They result in a case being worked out. And let's get those drug cases out of the lab to a private lab. If we've got a lab we trust, that we know can do the work, let's see if we can outsource those cases and get them to a private lab to do. The lab we're contracted with now, that we've started sending some cases to, drug cases, told me last week in a conversation, Director, we can do 1,000 a month and return them in 30 days. That's unbelievable. And so, and these are this is the lab we're already contractually using to do some of the DNA situation. What I want to get us to a point at the crime lab is where if your DNA request comes from law enforcement and it's a homicide, a murder, or a sexual assault, we keep it. We do it. Because that prosecutor and defense lawyer and that judge will know that that witness is coming directly from the GBI crime lab. He or she is close. He or she can get to a courtroom quickly. The other DNA request on property crimes, burglary, entering autos, things of that nature, which are very important, I believe, again, are ripe for outsourcing as well. That's what I want to get us, that's the point I want to get us to. You know, can I sit here and tell you that we don't need more scientists, that we wouldn't put them to work? Of course not. I wouldn't do that. But I will tell you that I'm convinced of it, that we can do things a little bit differently at the lab. And if we do, I'm convinced that we can cut into those numbers and we can begin pushing some of those cases, particularly the ones that we're relatively confident that won't end up in a trial posture, to private labs and let our folks do the cutting edge technology that they're capable of doing. That's mine. Thank you.
Follow up on that. So where in the budget are you showing that we're going to allocate money towards outsourcing that testing?
The money we have now to do that, Mr. Chairman, is through the federal grant money that we've received and the additional applications we'll be making through the year to do that. Now, I can't sit here and tell you we couldn't use some more, because we could.
But doesn't the federal money that we currently receive cover what outsourcing you're doing presently, and would not be monies used for the additional outsourcing that you're hoping to do with chemistry?
The small portion of the money is for chemistry purposes, so we'll be sending out some through that. But yes, any additional outsourcing, I'm going to have to find the funds for it. Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll need to know what that number is, because if you want to streamline process and you also want to outsource, then we need to know how much you're anticipating that it's going to cost in order to outsource it. You're already talking with labs that can do this for you and do 1,000 in 30 days turnaround. So what does that cost? What's it going to cost the agency in order to outsource it for that particular lab?
The drug tests will run about $160 a case. So we're in the process now. I've asked the lab director to actually come up with a figure that shows us cutting into those drug cases, and I'll have those numbers for you this week. Okay. And I'll be able to give those to you.
Because you've got so chemistry, you're looking at about 38 to 39% backlog in just your chemistry across the board. So this would be for all the different labs. And I appreciate what you're trying to do in terms of cost savings and looking for units that can outsource the chemistry side of it. The committee has, and I think the House has had tremendous concern and directed money towards it, as well as legislation towards addressing forensic biology. Looking at the DNA testing to tackle the rape kit backlog, which we did. We funded that with additional scientists for that purpose. But as we heard from testimony last week, you're getting about 200 or plus sexual assault kits in per month, and that you are only able to, with the scientists you do have, you're only able to address about 110 of those sexual assault kits on average. It may be a little bit higher each month depending on the flow and the nature of the kits. So we're still seeing a backlog, and you've got a 42% backlog on DNA testing with your forensic scientists. That is concerning to the House, and that is concerning to this particular subcommittee. So out of the scientists that we're cutting here, the 9 that are proposed for cutting, how many of those would be affecting the DNA forensic biology testing?
We haven't set a particular area to cut them out of, Mr. Chairman, and we're going to roll with basically as the retirements and resignations come next year, vacancies, things of that nature, we'll see where we're needing the scientists in the most area. I will tell you, I'll make commitment to you, as I made before to the whole committee, that there's nothing inside of the lab any more important to me than doing those sexual assault kits. You know, I would remind the committee too, and I know you know this, the numbers who came into the lab to the GBI long before I got there were as a result of law enforcement agencies holding those cases. It wasn't a result of the lab not doing them. And so once we got them, the lab committed to catching up those and completed that enormous task and did it in great style. And so, and again, I commit to you the same thing I committed to you before. I'm not going to allow that to happen again. Whatever I have to do, I'm going to do it. If I have to transfer people from one area to the other, we're not going to allow sexual assault kids to get that far behind again, ever.
Yeah, well, in my mind, it seems that you're going to need more personnel to test them because you're accumulating them faster than the scientists you have currently will allow you to test them presently. So, and the other part about it is that the money that you received in order to do the rate kit backlog, those were federal grant monies.
Yes, sir.
So now that those will eventually expire, if not have expired, and so going forward, you're still going to need scientists that are state-funded scientists in order to test the sexual assault kits that we keep accumulating. And the concern is that while we may have addressed the rape kit backlog, we see a backlog increasing as it pertains to sexual assaults. And so it would be helpful to know that these cuts here to scientists, I think the subcommittee's feelings are that those cuts to the scientists need not occur relevant to the scientists that would be doing forensic biology. And so I would ask for you to provide us with the anticipated salaries for the scientists that you would need to do the DNA testing, and that way we can start to look at a budget cost. And if you need the lab techs for those purposes to assist in that DNA testing, we'd also like to know that number as well. Questions from members of the committee? I have one from 27, Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question. So your proposal basically is to try to outsource a lot of the chemical testing related to drugs, correct?
That's correct.
So how is that going to work as far as preserving the chain of evidence and having those folks come and testify as witnesses? So if the prosecutor wants somebody to come and testify, do they have to actually make an outlay of money to a private company?
Possibly, yes. You know, what we'll have to do is the reason I think that area is so appropriate for outsourcing, and this is again from 35 years or so, well, not about 34, 35 years of trying cases, is that most of those don't go to trial. And so the ones that do, the larger scale trafficking cases, things of that nature, there'll have to be some discussion on how to bring those people back and how to pay for them. We may be in a position where if we save money by outsourcing 90% of our drug cases, we may have the ability to pay for those witnesses when they come. But yes, certainly that's going to be an issue. And the chain of custody, I will tell you that we won't cooperate or we won't contractually partner with an agency that we're not convinced is statutorily or scientifically at the same position we are on qualifications and things of that nature. And that would include being able to follow the chain of custody as well. But the evidence would come to us. We would follow the chain in turning it to that lab. They would return it to us, and we'd have it available for the purposes of court if it's needed.
Okay. Were you contemplating outsourcing the DNA testing as well for the sexual assault kits, or no?
We do some of that now. Some
Okay.
of the DNA is outsourced. My ultimate goal would be where if it's a sexual assault kit or a homicide DNA request, that's done at the GBI crime lab. In any other DNA on non-violent crimes, for example, burglaries, we get a number of DNA requests. Entering autos, we get DNA requests. We get virtually DNA requests on just about any type of case you can imagine.
Yeah, gotta love CSI.
I know.
Everybody wants their DNA.
But I think those are the type of DNA cases we need to have a discussion about outsourcing.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Definitely appreciate your commitment to making sure that we test the kits in a timely way, and I think that that's a sentiment that's shared widely in the House and in this committee. However, I'm still reflecting on what we heard last week, which is that we have a current backlog over 100, and that we're accruing on a monthly basis at a minimum 90 new kits that are in a backlog status, and as many as 150 per month in a backlog status, which would put us in a deficit of around 2,000 kits by the end of this calendar year. And that's a problem. And I think we also heard that we would be provided with numbers of what you would need in terms of not having a backlog for specifically sexual assault kits, and I understand that the scope of the backlog is bigger than that. So do you have the data for us in terms of what you need or the GBI needs in order to test without having a backlog accrue on a monthly basis, which is the status that we're currently in?
We're putting that together. We'll have it to the committee by tomorrow or Wednesday.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Vice Chairman Gravely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, thank you for your the testimony. To your point, Mr. Chairman, if this is a proposal for the chemical drug cases to be outsourced to the private labs, I think the number you had mentioned is that the lab has indicated they could do 1,000 a month. I would imagine that could pose a significant savings to the Bureau, or that could be allocated to some of the vacant science labs to then help with the sexual assault DNA. I guess focus on more of those you want to keep in-house if that savings does come back and we don't have to eliminate some of those forensic science positions.
Yeah, there's another thing too. We were talking last week about some costs to operate the Pooler laboratory, and had that discussion with the committee. Those costs are about $550,000 annually to operate that lab. If we get that budgeted to us, that number alone is probably 6, maybe 7 scientists that we'll hire that we can relegate or push toward doing DNA cases. So there's ways that we can fund that, I believe, without us necessarily standing here saying all we need is additional scientists.
Exactly.
I don't want to give the committee the impression that if I tell you extra bodies will make the backlog go away. Will it help? Of course it will. But I believe there are other ways in combination with that is the only way we're going to be able to attack this backlog with some finality and finally make a cut into it where we're not habitually, consistently, repeatedly coming here doing the same thing every year. I don't want to do that anymore.
Absolutely.
I want us to be able to say, with a partnering of if we have additional bodies, if we save money by being funded operationally and using that money toward additional scientists and pushing out what we can outsource, to me, in looking past a year-to-year basis, that's the only way I envision us successfully cutting into this backlog. There's, as much as work as we've done on gangs, which is so important, human trafficking, which is so important, inside of the Bureau, inside of that building, there's nothing more important to me than addressing the issues in the crime lab. Nothing.
How many?
Go ahead. Well, I commend you on the creativity, thinking in that realm of what we can do, how we can, as opposed to coming back to the committee. Really, that's outstanding work to be thinking in that vein. And again, I know it's a proposal. Do you have ballpark any type of estimated cost savings if a private lab is able to do 1,000 a month? What does that save the Bureau? And if those numbers aren't ready, we can talk about that offline outside the committee, because I understand, again, it's a proposed, getting that way. But I do commend you on drilling down to try to figure out different ways to save money so that we can look at the appropriated dollars going to areas that would better serve us in the sexual assault area.
Yeah, we're working on that as well, and I apologize that we don't have it for you now. Some of these things are just, when I sit down, Cleveland, who came testify last week, is a brand-new lab director. He's been, when he and I sit down and I charge him, Cleveland, there's nothing off the table. We've got to work together to find these answers, and we're in the process of putting that type of plan together. And again, I just, my goal is as I come back, hopefully year after year with you guys, I'm able to say, this backlog is here, then it's here, then it's here. That's my goal, to do that. And I just don't see how we can honestly, candidly, truthfully do that by me doing nothing but saying, give me some more bodies. I'm not going to disrespect you and say I wouldn't take them and I wouldn't use them and we don't need them. But I do believe that it's my responsibility to find as many different ways as I can to attack that issue.
I appreciate your candor. I think a couple of things I want to unpack with what you've said. Number one is that, Representative Gravely, I think you're right in saying we can get some efficiencies, but we've got to first, you still have to pay the contract. So you still got to pay for that. And then we don't know what those efficiencies will look like. When you have a backlog, you're just eating into the backlog. You're not actually getting ahead of it. You're trying to use process and contracting to reduce a almost 39% backlog in just chemistry, not to mention the 42% in the DNA. So that's why I was asking earlier, what do we need to do to help fund your initiative to outsource that? That's going to be a cost. It's not going to be a savings. It'll be a cost that we add on to what we're doing. Because if you could remedy the backlog on chemistry right now, you would have already done it.
Yes,
so we're not there. The second thing was that you had said, you mentioned to me that there was 9 funded scientists that you're in recruitment presently. Do you have the people ready for those positions?
Where are we at?
Not yet.
You don't have people that are ready to go and be hired for those positions?
No, they're in the interview process.
In the interview process, okay.
I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, one of the things I am going to change, and I've told the deputy directors of the Bureau that from now on, if we have positions open and funded, by George, we need to have somebody put in it.
Yeah.
And so that's going to change.
How long have these people been in the interview process?
I'd have to get that information.
Okay. I just don't want any holds keeping us back from moving these positions forward. And then going back to something that was said earlier, I do appreciate where you're coming from in terms of not coming back and asking each year. But to be candid and giving history of this, it was about 4 years ago that your predecessor had came to us and said, look, we need about 51 to 53 scientists to address what we project as being our backlog with population growing, the number of kits, the emphasis on CSI, and the number of submittals we're getting, in addition to the fact that we passed legislation that incentivized local governments turning over rape kits and sexual assault kits to GBI to be the central warehouse, which we think is good policy. But that's added to your workload, not reduced it. So even with those numbers that were dated, we were only able to put in about 10 scientists per year on average. I think we had requests for like 23 one year, and I think we matched that with 12 or 13, maybe 10 ultimately. So even looking back several years ago with the numbers that we saw then, and what I'm getting at is that your continuation of that request is not a continuation of the request. It's the request that we haven't filled the deficit that you needed anyway. So I want the committee members to understand that historically, and I wanted you to hear me say that, Director, that we don't look at it as you're constantly asking for new scientists. You've asked for those scientists, but from a budgetary standpoint, we haven't been able to fill all of them. And so I'm still looking at it as we're at a deficit in terms of scientist positions. We've been incrementally placing scientists in the budgets to address those. We've done an excellent job in addressing the rape kit issue. That was the priority. But now with the sexual assault kits backlog being at 42%, that needs to be addressed as expeditiously as possible as well. And so I wanted to make sure that we had that background information, and that's why the agency has come before us asking for those scientists in the past. And then the final question I had for you is looking at Pooler. When you say $550,000 for Pooler, my understanding that this was operational costs. These would not be positions for Pooler. So what would the positions be that are needed to operate the Pooler Science Lab if we were to put in DNA-based forensic scientists?
Well, you're absolutely correct. That cost is literally to turn the lights on and keep it functioning. I don't mean that in a flippant way, but to make sure that we're able to pay for all the utilities and things of that nature. You know, that lab, it's an unbelievable state-of-the-art version of what we got at headquarters. It's just much smaller. I don't know exactly how many DNA folks we can put there based on what we have. I can find that out real quickly and let you know before the day's over, in fact.
Okay.
So.
That's good. Vice Chair?
Yeah, Director, I'm going to kind of change the subject, I guess, maybe a little bit. I'm going to be kind of morbid. Scott Dutton has helped me out on a couple of different occasions where I had phone calls that I had to make on behalf of local funeral homes, things of that nature. One of the things that we've seen in the past is the autopsy backlog. And we tried to do a couple things the last couple of years. Do you know where we stand on that? Are we in fairly decent shape as far as that goes?
Yeah, they do great work there, Mr. Vice Chair. I think we currently have one opening for a medical examiner now, so we're almost up to full staff. And so when we hire that person, I think there's an offer outstanding to a person. So if we get that individual on soon, we should be in a good position. I can't tell you that they don't always have a few examinations to complete. They do.
But it's nowhere like what it was before, where we actually had a problem with bodies being outside. Okay.
No, they're doing tremendous work. I was by there was it a Monday a week ago or so? It's been a couple of Mondays ago perhaps, and they indicated over the weekend there were 22 bodies brought in for the purposes of examination. So they stay very, very busy. But they seem to stay on top of their work. The only circumstances in my 11 months here, I've had a couple of calls, and they've responded when I asked them to very quickly and efficiently. So no, I don't. It's nothing like it was. It's my understanding.
That's great. I appreciate that,
Yes,
and a shout out seriously to one of your deputies. Scott has always done a phenomenal job of getting back with us and helping us solve problems when it came up. So thank you, sir.
Deputy Director Dutton is a tremendous asset to the Bureau. He runs the investigative section, and I could not make it without him. He's a fine man. So,
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Director, thank you again, but I was a little concerned, and we're a growing state. We're really growing. And I recall some years ago when I made a living, we did a job in Ohio. They were going through terrible budget times. And it had gotten so bad until line folk were terrified because they were told how much they had to cut. And so we'd literally go in there and see a disaster, but they got to keep their jobs because they kept cutting. We're still in a meth epidemic. All kinds of things are going on. And I was glad to hear the chairman say what he said. We don't know what next year is going to be, so we can't have you reluctant to ask for what you need. Because if we're not careful, we don't want the GBI. I'm old enough to remember the GBI when it was just a pass along for retirement. It really did nothing in Georgia, but gave people a chance to retire who were in law enforcement, no good to anybody. Then they'd send them over there and they'd be a GBI agent until they got out the door. Thank God we ain't there no more, but I've seen it. And it was a political thing. I got a buddy who wants to be a GBI. Well, give him a badge and send him on down here. But that's not where we are today. And we don't need to get back there because I don't want to run on the theme that we made GBI really cut that budget. You know, Joe's funeral was delayed for about 3 days because autopsies 3 days longer than usual because autopsies were so backed up. Now, I'm very leery that when we start talking about budget cuts, when we've gone through what we've gone through and most of the fat's out the door, you start cutting tendons, it's hard to walk, and it's sure hard to pick up your arms.
Well, I know, and you didn't pose a question to me, but let me comment on it anyway, if you don't mind. And okay. Well, I will tell you this. One good thing about coming to this position of director at this stage of my life, after having done everything I've done, is that the only commitment I have is to make this the best state investigative agency in the United States. Not the second best, not one of the best, but the best. I will not sit here and tell you something that isn't true for anybody. I won't do it. I won't do it. I love this job. I love this agency, but I love my self-respect more than I love anything else. And I commit to you the way I committed to this chairman, the way I committed to the governor when he asked me to do this, that I was going to do it the right way. And I will tell you unequivocally, categorically, that's all he's ever asked me to do, is to go over there and do that job, do it the right way, say what's the truth, and that's exactly what I intend on doing. If I did not think that we could cut into this backlog with both a combination of scientists, outsourcing, looking at our operations, I wouldn't tell you. Because I won't tell you, I can make a whole lot more money practicing law than doing this. And so I'm doing this because I want to do it, because I love this job and I love this agency. And I'm convinced 120% that if I have a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of room, that I can cut into these numbers. If I don't, I'm going to kill myself trying. I'm that committed to doing this. Okay? I guarantee that would be expedited. I guarantee you. I didn't mean to get on my high horse, Mr. Chair. I apologize.
No, we appreciate and value your public service. It's tremendous. Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Reynolds, I really appreciate both your candor and the thoughtfulness that you've provided over your many testimonies this year, and listening to it and then thinking about the immediate problems that we have for 2020 and for 2021. I also want to ask just a broader question in long term, and with respect to sexual assault kits, are there actions that the state can take to reduce the overall level of sexual violence so we have fewer victims and fewer kits to test? And it would seem that certainly testing in a timely manner and bringing cases and prosecutions are one thing, but I'd be curious if you have any thoughts or ideas on that as well.
I do have an idea on that. It's something that that we thought about and discussed a lot when I was the district attorney of Cobb County. And I'm going to give some, she won't like me doing this, but I'll give some credit for discussion I had with my wife. She said that she came up with this great idea of cutting or curtailing into domestic violence by teaching young men at a very young age how you respect and treat women. That's not something, the GBI, we're statutorily bound to do A, B, and C.
Right.
But if you're asking me my opinion, we ought to go into a middle school and a high school. And as part of a health class, you ought to be able to take a class that says, this is how you treat and respect a woman. This is what you do. And not just male to female gender, but gender to gender. We ought to treat, if we taught that as part of a health class where we respect boundaries, we respect consent, we respect the word no, then I'm convinced if we taught that the way we teach various other subjects that it would make a difference.
Thanks.
Mr. Director, Thank you. We have one more subject
Yes, sir.
area to cover, and that's going to be regional investigative services. There's some substantial cuts in here in terms of vacant funded positions, so let's roll through those,
Yes,
and then
sir.
we'll be wrapping up.
In FY '21, in the investigative services, we're continuing the reduction of the 12 sworn from FY '20 and adding an additional 8 retirements or resignations that we anticipate during the course of fiscal year '21. That also continues the non-sworn positions that we talked about in FY '20. That would be a total savings to the budget of about $2,500,000. And the last area would be the elimination of one-time costs for watch desk operations. That's a small amount of about $30,000. I did want to tell the committee, because I know how responsive this committee has been on the watch desk and the See Something, Send Something app, that last year, the watch desk at GSAC, as part of the GBI, received 3,014 tips last year to the watch desk. Out of those 3,014 tips, 48% were the direct result of the See Something, Send Something app. 386 of those were threats to life. 100 of those were threats to school safety. So I just wanted the committee to know that that watch desk is working, that app is working, and it's something that we're very proud of.
Now, Mr. Director, on that, I noticed there's another app that GMO had talked to us about. Is this the same app?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We work with them very closely on that.
All right. Continue.
And there in 4.6, there's an increase for the purposes of the GBI Gang Task Force in the database. I'm also very proud to announce that database is now operational. It's up and it's running. We have, in a partnership with DOC and DCS, that is up. The only difference between the FY '20 and FY '21 is there's an additional cost for a database administrator to operate that database in order that we make sure all the information going in it is done correctly and pursuant to 28 CFR, which is a federal code that we have to follow. 4.7 is a transfer of the funds for the 2 SORB analysts that I discussed earlier. Those would be transferred back to DBH, HDD in order for the Sexual Offender Review Board to operate that function. And the last area in the investigations is the 4.8 reduction, funds for travel and supplies to the tune of about $186,000.
All right, question from Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. You mentioned whenever we were going over the regional investigative services for the amended budget that there were going to be 4 positions eliminated in the Regional Drug Task Force. How many of those are going to be eliminated? How many Regional Drug Task Force positions will be eliminated in the full budget, fiscal year 2021?
Is that it? That's it.
Okay.
Representative Boundary. There are no additional positions in the Drug Enforcement Office.
Okay, all right. Do you have any idea of, kind of where that? I'm just very cognizant as a, state agents, that we're not pushing those costs down to our locals. And I know like CMANS has been very successful in Cherokee, and I know you're very familiar with that. And, we had Phil Price that was our director there whenever he was with the GBI, and now he's with the sheriff's office. But so who's going to fill those shoes? Do you have any kind of as far as succession plan?
Yeah, I was talking to Deputy Director Dutton just a few minutes before we started today. He has the flexibility in his position to put people where he thinks they need to be based on crime trends, numbers from areas, things of that nature. We're not eliminating any of the 4 regional drug enforcement offices that we have. We're just taking individuals out of those. For example, the gang task force we started, a lot of those individuals come from drug task force because they're comparable work, and by that I mean wiretaps, long, lengthy investigations, sometimes complex. And so we don't anticipate any reduction in our regional drug enforcement activities. In fact, one of the things that make those function so well is our partnership with locals. Locals come to the task force once we do the background and we decide to accept them. And so it could very well be a circumstance where when we lose a body in a drug enforcement office, we may very well be looking for a local to resupply that. But that's something they're all willing and in agreement to do because we work in that locals area as well. And so I really don't think and I'm confident in telling you after speaking with Deputy Director Dutton that our work in drug and stopping, fighting, trafficking, and narcotics will in any way cease or stop in any way.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just didn't want to, I did not want us to be hamstringing our local.
Yes, ma'am.
So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. We appreciate your testimony, and that concludes our presentation of GBI. Did anyone else here to speak on matters before the committee? If you are, just raise your hand. Okay. Seeing none, appreciate the members of the committee. We'll have some lunch, and then remember tomorrow we'll be back at 10 a.m. To continue on with our other sessions. And we also have scheduled sessions for Wednesday at 10 a.m. We're going to be in a different room tomorrow. We're going to be on 606, I believe, tomorrow, and then we'll be back here at 406 on Wednesday morning. Thank you.